The story that is about to be told depicts a young man who's intrigued by the concept of demise. Don't be mistaken though. He's no more interested in corpses than in the creepiest snakes and spiders. He fears corpses. In fact, his wild interest in the deceased stems from a certain corpse. He thinks that if you are not scrolling to hear a story about how that corpse came to be, and how this young individual dived headfirst into the realm of finality, you should keep scrolling. It's 1985, and in Normandy, summer life is booming. Alexis's friends are meeting up with girls, so the young man finds himself celebrating the end of school alone. Going for a mellow and peaceful boating session on his own, he greets the sun bright-faced and relaxed, but suddenly he realizes that a storm is coming. The sky rages in the distance, and bolts of lightning slice the air, giving it a sweet, unusual taste. The boy panics immediately. To add to everything, he opens his sails and capsizes his boat, and for a moment, it all seems as though the first fatality of the story is near. Fortunately, however, Alexis is saved by a boy who's 2 years older than him. His name is David Gorman, and as Alexis warns us, he is the future corpse. Speaking of the future, the young boy is speaking with a caseworker who wants to get his perspective on the story. As it turns out, Alexis is being accused of something very dark, and the caseworker needs to hear what he has to say about it. The boy looks pale and disoriented. He avoids further conversation and says nothing about the accusations made by David's mother. Back to the past, David takes Alexis to his house and introduces him to Mrs. Gorman. The meeting is delightful, and the compassion expressed is immeasurable. But soon, something extremely weird happens. Actually, weird is the wrong word for the event that occurs. Mrs. Gorman offers Alexis a hot bath after the fear she experienced earlier, but as nice as she is, she overdoes it a little. She takes his clothes off herself, including his underwear, and stares at the boy's for a good 2 seconds in awe. Alexis has no idea he's been The memory of this moment will surely not haunt him for the rest of his life. After the calm, hot bath in which he feels like an Egyptian deceased pharaoh, he receives a lot of attention from David as well. The older boy gets him everything he needs, and then some. Not oversharing at all, he tells him about his father's recent demise as well. He also adds that his dad's passing was what made him quit school and start working full-time for the family's shop. Here, in talking about their dilemmas and struggles, they become good friends. Later that day, Alexis meets with his literature teacher, named Lefebvre. As it turns out, he has read the boy's writings about demise, and he would like to see him in his literary class next year. There is one problem, however. Alexis's father would like to see his son working next year, and the young man seems to lean more towards this idea. Still, the offer remains open until further notice. Hopping towards the present, we see the same social worker visiting Alexis's home. The young man's father seems to be a traditional masculine man with an empty head and a low voice. The mother seems to be a woman who finds herself stuck between wanting to provide a loving environment for her child and having to cope with the Mr. Patriarch over there. Diving back into the past once more, we see Alexis returning David's clothes. The young men are planning to go out to have some fun, but before that can be possible, Alexis will have to see his mother for the second time today. Here too, an inappropriate amount of love and affection is expressed towards the clinging boy. Mrs. Gorman seems to be genuinely happy that her son has finally found a good friend. Walking on a boulevard a short time later, David offers Alexis a job in his shop. It sounds like a good opportunity, but Alex can't help but feel forced into a close relationship with him. He has experienced enough closeness today. He needs some air. Nothing of special significance happens for a while. The boys go to the cinema and watch a movie together. They are planning out the rest of their night when suddenly they see a boy around the same age as them trying to swim on the blacktop. Drunk as he is, he pays no heed to the passing cars and flying curses, so surely he will very soon perish at this rate. Lunging forward, David gives him a hand and encourages Alexis to do the same as well. The young boy is in no mood to hurt irresponsible people, but he is very soon reminded of himself later that morning. So defeated, he appears behind the drunk boy's shoulder in no time. When the drunk pisses himself, however, and when this process of helping drags itself across eternity, Alexis grows more impatient. David gets a little annoyed with his sulking too, but he feels responsible enough to help. Soon he finds a good place for himself in the warm sand and combs his hair gently. At this moment, Alexis suspects something. David's heroism today might have had a different reason as well. This drunk boy is just as beautiful as Alexis. The next morning, after admiring himself in the mirror, he talks to his mother about his future. It is obvious what his parents want. They want him to work. The only difference between the two is that the father is open about it, while the mother is hiding it behind her warm sentences. As for Alexis himself, he has no idea what will make him happy. In any case, work, money, and some butter on bread are far more important than a degree in literature. So the young man calls up the shop in the next scene and signs himself up as David's new employee. He will at least work this summer. During the talk with Mrs. Gorman in the next scene, he learns that David came back at 4 in the morning. This information is quite new for the boy. Last night he came home at 1 a.m. What was David doing until 4? This sudden revelation of dishonesty makes Alex regret his decision immediately. Rapidly, questions start arising in his mind. Is he making a mistake by getting close to the Gorman family? Can they be trusted? Alexis is trying not to get suffocated by these questions, when suddenly, another important character in this story, Kate, appears behind him. Kate is a 21-year-old Englishwoman working in France as an au pair. Working on her French, she tries to communicate with everyone, and this time, she just happens to be behind the young man. The two introduce themselves nicely and talk about the sea. The young man was suffocating in the face of dark questions before this, but now he finds himself breathing fresh air in the bright afternoon sun. This sun, however, sheds light on many things, most importantly Kate's reflective skin and her very female breasts, so Alexis is struck for a moment. Thankfully, he manages to gather himself up pretty quickly. After talking about his new job, the two parted ways and promised that they were going to run into one another again this summer. In the next scene, as Alexis enters David's shop, he is visibly jealous of David's recent adventure with the drunk boy. He quickly causes himself to ask too many questions though, so the subject of the conversation changes. Seconds pass, and Alex receives a gift from his new boss. It is a bike helmet, the greatest gift for a boy who doesn't even have a bike, let alone know how to ride it. Thankfully, David has one, so the two can go on thousands of trips around the area. For a boy who's obsessed with demise, Alex is a little too terrified by the ride. Perhaps it's all David's fault? He's riding recklessly. In the future, the caseworker meets with Mr. Lefebvre and lets him know about something very important about Alex's case. If they do not learn what drove his behavior by the next week, the judge will put him in detention. The teacher doesn't want to betray his student's trust, but since the young man doesn't talk, he surrenders. Lefebvre might have some ideas about Alex's motives. Back to the past, which feels extremely distant now, the boys appear in an amusement park. Discussing David's obsession with speed, Alex pelts him with questions. Why would somebody want to go that fast? As David explains, he never feels like he's going too quickly. Even more, no matter how hard he accelerates, he always feels like a bird, trying to catch speed, but the speed keeps slipping away. It's like a line on the horizon. He will never be able to grab onto it, but chasing it is freeing. And then again, if ever he manages to get a taste of it, he will melt with meaningful satisfaction. The boys get into a fight then, but the reason they appear in that situation is quite serious. The boat that got capsized back at the beginning of the story belonged to a friend of Alex's. Back then, after saving him, David promised the young man that he would tow the boat later and take it to the harbor, but as they now learn, he forgot to do it. The owner of the boat had to tow it himself and pay a huge fine on top of it too. After the general battle, the boys take care of each other's war wounds. The moment is warm and intimate, and it doesn't seem like everything is going to be ruined soon. Speaking of the ruin, we are back in the future, in the next scene. Here, Mr. Lefebvre convinces the young, pale boy to write about what happened. He understands that talking about his experience might be impossible, but Alexis can write. It is something he does very well. And so, the young boy's fingers soon appear dancing on his typewriter. When he gets to the part of the room where the two got beat up, he empathizes that after taking care of the cuts and bruises, the two got inside David's room. As we swim toward the past again, we are never told or shown what happened behind the closed door of David's room that night. The only thing we are shown is the way the two discuss their own perspectives on demise afterward. As it turns out, David has an opposite view of it. While Alex tries to grasp the heads and tails of the most unknowable notion ever, David prefers to simply laugh at its face. Perhaps this is why he proposes to make a pact at this moment. Whoever perish first, the other one has to dance on his grave. This oath is extremely difficult to take for Alexis, but in this intimate moment, there is nothing he can refuse David. Quitting being reluctant, he promises to dance in the face of David's demise if it ever comes to that. The two give each other a long, passionate kiss, and so the first hour of the following 1008 hours of being a couple begins for them. Making the most of every opportunity, they make every minute of it count. Troubleless and full of the magic of love, the boys immerse themselves fully into the ocean of happy carelessness. As their heads swim from excitement and hope, they dance without a break. The desire for each other is so strong that it blocks the way of any conscious thought. Perhaps this is why Alex fails to grasp the heads and tails of the emotions he is feeling. He knows one thing, however. This feeling that reigns over his mind is something else, something ungraspable, like the speed in David's eyes and the notion of demise in Alexis's imagination. In the next scene, Mrs. Gorman offers Alex to start working full-time when the summer is over. She desires to grow the business as well and open another shop in a tourist district. Alex's mind isn't in a position to plan out the future in detail, but it's definitely in the mood to make everybody happy, so he promises to think about it. Later that day, he discusses poetry, Lefebvre, and leaving school with David. As it turns out, Lefebvre used to admire David's writing as well. As the young man says, he was furious when he left to work in a shop. The subject of David's father soon slips into their conversation. It is one of those interactions during which the lovers try to understand each other on a deeper level. As is obvious, David is still grappling with his dad's passing. The boys go shopping then. After buying a bunch of new clothes, the problem of Alex's poor style is thrown out of the window. The magic of love is still as strong as ever. If only Alexis knew what would happen to those clothes in the future. We see it in the next scene. They get burned. When we get back to the past, we see trouble brewing in paradise. An odd number, an outsider named Kate, crashes into the relationship of the boys and changes it forever. One day, when she meets them on a beach, she is thrown aback by David's body and soothed by his excessive attention toward her. Alexis simply stands aside as the boy and the girl talk in a slightly flirtatious manner. The only times Alexis is invited into their conversation is when David wants to use him as leverage to throw himself higher in Kate's eyes. Most likely he isn't giving it any conscious thought, but the way he behaves at this moment makes Alex feel excluded. The memory of the details will soon fade away from his mind. The darkness in his mind that sets in as David flirts with Kate gets in the way of engraving information in his memory. Gloom is written all over his face in the next scene at the shop. David is as energetic as always, but this flamboyant aura of his is annoying Alex out of his mind. The difference between their moods is so great that it very soon creates a terrible conflict between them. Alex is just maddened by the fact that it was David who came onto him first and then tossed him like a used sock. He feels abandoned, and at first, David tries to gaslight him out of his troubles. He does it so well that the gases are suffocating and the lights are burning, but unfortunately for him, this isn't enough to calm Alex down. This is why, very soon the truth is forced out of David's mouth. He is bored with Alex. He doesn't even want to think about spending the next week with him and nobody else. He needs other people. He needs change. The notion of being owned by Alex is unimaginably dreadful for him. Pain hits abruptly and with no prior warning. It crashes into the boy's mind, and as alarms of insecurity and rage go off, Alex loses all sense of rationality. David clearly comes out as evil in this moment, but the tears rolling on his cheek make us wonder if there is something deeper lurking behind the facade of his words and explanations. Alex almost slays him with a rock at this moment. Running outside, he makes a mess in the shop and cycles away. The parents are confused about their children's behavior throughout the course of the next few scenes. Alex gets home, goes upstairs, and cries his pain away. His face is completely flushed when he comes down to have some dinner with his family. Unfortunately for him, the pain that he is about to feel looms over the pain he is crying about like a chain-toothed mountain. In the news, a story of a recent crash on the road is told. With a ruined bike in the background, a driver talks to the journalists. A thought appears in the young man's mind instantaneously. He has to run away right now and check if David is all right. Towards the end of his search, he gets to his house and finds Mrs. Gorman all in black. The woman lets him know of the news. David is deceased, and it is all his fault. Accusing Alex of ending her son, she screams at him to go away. Alexis's head starts swimming. Loose, his feet start wiggling, and his ankles start twisting. His motor cortex, drunk on the tragedies of reality, fails to regain full control over Alex's body. It's impossible for Alex to determine who is at fault, but he sure feels like the crash happened because of him. The next morning, after 0 nights sleep, he tells his father about the accident. The old man thinks he should get to work and show Mrs. Gorman some support. If there's anything he can do for Alex, he is always available. The young man does as he is told. The shop feels cold, but is colorful with memories that were made there. For a moment, a sudden tide of very real experience comes over the boy. Feeling David's presence, he dives into this experience head first, but suddenly hears the voice of Mrs. Gorman. The woman is taken aback by the fact that this young man still dares to face her, but she has no idea what she is going to be asked very soon. Alex wants to see David's body. It is very important to him. Feeling a strong wave of anger, the mother tells the young man the full truth. Paying no heed to what Alex is going to feel after learning it, she lets him know that David was chasing after him when he died. Being as cruel as a meerkat, the mother makes sure Alexis feels responsible for David's demise. Soon, the attempt to get back to his love brings him to writing. Through writing, he blows some life into the memory of David and experiences him all over again. As, in the next scene, the caseworker and Mr. Lefebvre talk about the urgency of knowing Alex's perspective, the boy himself is sitting on the beach. The last person he wants to see, Kate, appears behind him now. She sits with him, and suddenly, the young man realizes that he feels safe with her. For some reason, the conversation that starts out feels neither forced nor negative. Alexis reveals to her that he was in a relationship with David, and the girl reveals that she slept with him. Expressing her surprise, she says that she is sorry. Now that she knows about it, she regrets her intimacy with David. Their conversation is accepting and soothing. This is why Alexis feels an urge to tell her everything. She is the first person he's opening up to, and Kate turns out to be a great listener. The two laugh and weep together, and Kate remains compassionate even when the boy tells her the weirdest thing. As he points out, he needs to see David's body before he can dance on his grave, as you do after your loved one passes away, of course. Alexis goes to Kate's and changes into her clothes. The English girl has devised a perfect plan for him to be able to see David's corpse. Soon, she turns Alex into her sister, cycles to the morgue with him, and speaks with the guard. It's illegal to do so, but the girl is so good at negotiations that the guard surrenders. The experience Alex has to go through is totally devastating for her mind. Finding himself in front of what once was David, he looks at the eyes that once were open, the mouth that once spoke, and the hands that once caressed his body. He would give everything for his heart to start beating again. The pain is so irresistible that it takes over the young boy's body within a matter of seconds. Unexpectedly, he throws himself at David's corpse and embraces him firmly. All is over very quickly then. In trying to tear him off the body, the guard discovers that he's a boy, and Alex finds himself forced to flee as fast as he can. When he gets inside his house, he is so drawn by his thoughts and the experiences that he had to go through that he forgets all about his mother. The woman is taken aback by the sight of her boy wearing a girl's clothes, but Alex manages to come up with a good enough story to calm her down. In the conversation that comes after that, the mother mentions Alex's uncle, who used to be gay, and immediately, the desire is born in the boy's mind to see him. Unfortunately, however, they won't be able to speak about it in length now. The father is coming, and he will turn mad if he sees his son like this. In the next scene, we get back to the present time. Alexis hands over the papers full of his story to Mr. Lefebvre. After the man finishes reading, he is pleasantly surprised. The boy has clearly managed to put his pain into words. Even more, as Alexis points out himself, since the beginning of telling his story, his perspective on this whole thing has shifted. Instead of focusing on the pain, he has started to see himself as his own character, so the focus has shifted to his own story. The tale, however, isn't finished yet. The end is near, and it is going to be the hardest part to write, mainly because it has not happened yet. Towards the end of their meeting, Alexis asks Lefebvre if David seduced him too. As the man says, he did. But their contact never could have passed the frame of the student-teacher relationship. Back in the past, the picture of David's deceased face overpowered the memory of his bright, sun-touched eyes. This is why he feels forced to call Mrs. Gorman and ask her to give him a picture of David. Unfortunately, his pleading isn't answered with compassion. A thought appears in his mind later that night. According to Jewish tradition, a headstone of the deceased isn't erected until a year passes since their demise. This means that Alexis won't be able to recognize his grave. This is why he dresses up to leave his house in the middle of the night. His mother catches him in the process of leaving. The woman is warm and caring all the way. When Alexis tells her that he's just going out for a breather, she simply asks him not to go far. Seeing her mother as an accepting individual, the boy decides to ask her about his Uncle Jackie once more. He knows that in his mother's eyes, this will become proof of his sexuality, but he still wants to do it. A kind smile stretches over the woman's face then, as she says she liked Uncle Jackie a lot. A short time later, Alexis sneaks inside a cemetery to find a newly dug grave with no headstone. After finding it, his heart begins to race. An immeasurable amount of sudden emotion takes him away into the land of the unknown, and the young man finds himself in the realms of desperation, where no man can dance. Here, the men throw themselves on graves, and they beat their fists on the ground that covers the bodies of their loved ones' bodies. Without managing a single rational thought, their bodies try to dig the soil as if they were thoughtless stray dogs. Are they trying to rejoin their significant others? It is difficult to say. The next morning, he asks his father to deliver a message to Kate. Based on the way hope shines out of the man's eyes, Alex understands that, deep down, he knows about his son's orientation. After the message is delivered, Kate appears at his house. She is not at all mad at Alex. He just abandoned her with a terrible man at the morgue. Big deal. After the apology is given, Alex tells her about what happened at the cemetery last night. The girl avoids telling him what she really thinks at first. She tries to leave after listening, but her opinion is demanded, so she decides to risk hurting Alex by telling him the truth. He never loved the real David. He loved the body in which he put a character that he imagined. To put it in simpler terms, he loved the idea of David and nothing more. It didn't exist in actual reality, and now he is ruining his life over something he imagined. What a truly comforting reality check this is. After throwing a brick of truth in the young man's face, Kate realizes that she has to make him feel a little warm too. This is why she gives him a kiss on the lips before leaving. The boy is confused about whether he should feel happy or desperate at first, but Kate's kiss seems to have eliminated all the gloom from his face. Later that evening, Alexis finally finds it in himself to dance. Demonstrating life in the face of demise, he is taken away from David's grave by security. And so, we are finally done chasing the present time. When Alex's hearing starts at the court, we think that soon his sexuality will be revealed to his parents and the entire community. But it seems the people involved in this case, mainly Kate, have given the judge a different kind of story. As it turns out, she told the court that the boys were fighting over her when this accident happened. And so, the truth is revealed in court with only a flicker of a lie. The sentence is quite light. Alex will have to go through 140 hours of community service. Kate leaves the courtroom immediately after the session, so the young man is unable to express his immeasurable gratitude towards her. The communal service isn't that bad. In the next scene, he is clearing the beach with other workers when suddenly, he notices a familiar face. The young man whom Alex and David helped through his drunken hours is overlooking the beach and smoking a cigarette. Alex recognizes him very well, but the young man doesn't remember ever seeing him. The two hit it off really quickly. They seem to like each other from the very beginning. Here, Alexis offers to go for a boat ride, and the young man agrees immediately. This isn't the way his story ends, however. The novel about the young man's character is still far from being finished. It isn't frustrating at all, however. David used to chase speed, but Alexis has clearly found a better thing to do. He is going after his own story, and now that the weight of the darkest chapter of his book is finally off his shoulders, he can continue living free.